Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to the Peptide PhDs. This is the show where tiny molecules meet big ideas. And these are ideas for living better and living longer and stronger.
That's right, guys. I'm Dr. Alan Jones, and we're here with Dr. Mark Bartlett. And together, we are going to explore this wild new peptide era that we're all experiencing right now. And we're going to explore everything that comes with that.
It really is the wild new era, isn't it? Yep,
It
peptides,
is.
metabolism, muscle, sleep, stress, aging. If it affects your health span, it's fair game for us.
That's right. And you know what? We're promised we're going to keep it real. We're going to keep it smart. We're going to keep it fun without making you feel like you accidentally walked into a biochemistry exam.
I'm not going to
And
lie. Sometimes it kind of feels like that. But if I get too deep, Dr. Jones will correct me and vice versa. We keep each
vice
other
versa.
honest.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Yeah, so settle in, grab a tea or a protein shake, whatever it is your choice, and let's dive into those little signals that shape your life.
Yeah. And Dr. Mark, tonight we're going to be talking about inside the GLP-1 era and what is really happening beneath the hype.
That's right. You know, unless you've been living under a rock for the last year or two, you you will have heard about GLP-1s. And today we're tackling one of those biggest shifts in modern medicine. I think it's just revolutionary. These GLP-1 drugs, they're like, you've probably heard of Ozempic, semaglutide, tirzepatide, some things you can't pronounce, some things you can. They're like actually driving double-digit weight loss across the globe. So these therapies have been so effective, like we can't ignore them. I didn't even recognize my hairdresser the other day. I mean, people are changing fast, right? A level of weight loss that has just previously been unheard of.
Yeah, it's crazy. It really is. But unfortunately, Dr. Mark, there's a side of this story that a lot of people are not hearing, right? And so, along with that fat loss, they can also, these GLP-1 receptor agonists, the GLP-1 RAs, as we call them, can also drive like a serious loss of lean body mass, which includes muscle mass, connective tissue, and so forth. But man, that can account for sometimes as high as 40% of the total weight lost in some of the clinical studies that we're reviewing.
Yes,
So
and we're going to dig into that detail later in the podcast today, right? So in other words, the number on the scale might look really great, but if too much of that weight is coming from muscle, then that's a little bit of a warning sign, right? So, and also when people stop the GLP-1 therapy, a large share of that regained weight comes back as fat rather than muscle. So here's the thing. There are probably people on this call tonight. I'm sure if the statistics are right, that there are people that are on these GLP-1s, and we're going to talk about the good. And we don't want anyone to feel like they're not included in our thoughts. But it is good to know both sides of the coin, isn't it?
no, that's exactly right. And so here's the good news, Dr. Mark, that there really are very clear evidence-based strategies that can help us protect our muscle mass while we're on these medications. And so whether it's a higher protein take, structured resistance training, targeted bioactive precision peptides like, sources from fava beans, or something as simple as staying properly hydrated, all of those things can help us preserve our lean muscle mass and support our performance.
Yeah, so it's going to be evidence-based tonight. We're going to dig into some of the studies that are done.
Mhm.
And towards the end, we'll offer you some suggestions in the form of, like, for example, a muscle preservation stack. Stack is the term that they're using now when they talk about using two or more peptides or
Yep.
a strategy there. So we're going to help you change the trajectory. And maybe it's not you, maybe it's your friends. And maybe you sort of, it's awkward. Wow, you seem to have lost some weight. No, this is diet and nutrition, I promise you. Well, you know
Yeah.
what? That's okay. We can help.
Yeah, that's right. So, whether you're a clinician prescribing these therapies or a patient that are using the therapies or just someone that's curious about the future of weight loss medicine as it exists today, I think this conversation that we're about to have is going to really give people a more complete and more honest picture of this GLP-1 receptor agonist era that we're in.
Yeah, so
So,
stick with us. Stick with us. We know that statistically, a lot of people jump off around the 20-minute mark. I guess that's the attention span of the average person. I know
yeah.
that a lot of people jump back on, but stick with us and we'll share all this with you. But first off, chapter 1, this just in, because Alan Jones is relentless in his search for the latest study that might impact you and me. And you've got a really good one tonight. Tell us about it,
Well,
Jones.
yeah, Dr. Mark, I tell you what, this study is fantastically, and this paper is actually a paper entitled Real World Evidence on the Utilization, Clinical, and Comparative Effectiveness and Adverse Effects of Newer GLP-1 RA based weight loss therapies. Brett, if you'll pull it up real quick, I've got it pulled up here so everybody can see it. There it is right there with a part of our abstract. Thompson et al. It's a 2025 study, so it's very new. But this study, Dr. Mark, it zooms in on what actually happens when GLP-1 RA weight loss drugs like liraglutide, semaglutide, tirzepatide, when they move from these pristine, well-controlled clinical trials into these messy real-world situations. That is what's so phenomenal about this study. It takes the real-world effect into play. So,
yeah, that's so true. Like, I don't know if most people realize, but in the clinical studies world, and I've been involved in these. I used to work for the National Cancer Institute, and before that, the Australian National University as an immunologist. You do these studies. First off, you do sort of what you call phase 1, and that would be sort of maybe animal studies. Phase 2 might be a human study. Phase 3 would be a multi-center human study. And then you're allowed to release the drug, right? If the FDA is happy with it. What I think most people don't realize is that there's a phase 4. And phase 4 is in the wild.
mhm.
So every drug that's out there right now is really kind of a phase 4 study. And at that point, you've gone from maybe 100 or 1,000 people to tens of thousands or millions of people, literally millions. And when it's in the wild, then you see like what's really happening, and it's longer term and it's more people. And so that's kind of where we are in this situation, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right, Dr. Mark. And when you look at those carefully run trials, most people remain on the therapy for the duration of the study, and probably because they're compensated to do so, right? Most of these studies, the participants are compensated. But in, say, routine care, about 50%, in this is real world, about 50% of the patients actually stop the GLP-1 RA drugs within the first year. And Dr. Mark, believe it or not, that actually most of that actually occurs within the first 4 or 5 minutes. So among people that are using these medications for obesity, there's actually one study that was referenced in this review by Thompson that actually showed that only about a third of those participants were still on treatment after 12 months.
Yeah, so interesting. Yeah, I feel like the
Mhm.
stronger the stronger the treatment, sometimes the more rapid the side effects are, and people don't stay there. And it's not just whether or not they stay on the therapy; it's how they're dosed. So in that Danish obesity cohort, only about 10% followed the recommended 4 weekly dose escalations, right? So there's a lot of devil in the details there.
Yeah, there really are. And I have to say that seeing these results in this study was a little bit troubling to me because, most of our clinicians, our practitioners are being fed results from these tightly controlled studies that when you look at a real world scenario like this, those results seem to be unreplicable in the real world. And so I don't know. It seems like when you look at the outcomes from the clinical studies, the pattern is really, really clear that adherence and dosage drive results. So,
Yeah, well, it was clear from this study when they reviewed in these obesity clinics, right, using the near target sort of doses that you'd
mhm,
expect, they see double-digit percentage weight loss, right, 10 to
yep,
13% in 6 to 12 months, and even higher in some of the folks that are like really adhering to the study, right?
yep.
And tirzepatide, if I'm not mistaken, this is a dual agonist, right?
It is.
So,
Yes, sir.
so you'll hear about this, guys. You'll hear about like one particular GLP-1 receptor agonist, and then there are some that actually deal with not just GLP-1 but GIP. And then
Yep.
there's something new coming on the market, which is three things: glucagon plus GIP plus GLP-1. So these
That's
can be
right.
very powerful, right? So I guess
Yeah.
the take home here is that like amazing results.
Yeah. I tell you what, another outcome that I found from this particular review was a bit confusing to me. And what it found is that people without diabetes, because remember, most of these drugs were developed for diabetics, right? They were originally diabetic drugs. But what they found in the study was that people without diabetes tend to lose more weight than those with type 2 diabetes. And that's not only been seen in just this real world scenario study that they looked at on the reviews, but in multiple other real world cohorts as well. So it just, I don't know. I found that confusing. Why do you think that is? I mean,
Yeah, I guess it's just two different sets of people with two different issues, and I guess you expect it to go one way or the other. I'm not sure of the mechanism, but
yeah,
it is interesting. And like, because as you said, these GLP-1 drugs have been miracles for folks that with diabetes.
yeah,
But I don't know if any of this audience is obviously far too sophisticated for watching programs like The Simpsons. But my kids were kind of raised on it. I know, I'm a terrible dad. We joke about it all the time because my kids are now in their 20s and 30s. But
yeah.
there's this one scene where Homer's sitting with his doctor, right? Do you remember that one, Alan?
I
He sits
do
with his doctor
actually.
and he
Yeah.
says, "Oh, doctor, how come I can't get this drug? Like, is it because they're saving the drug for people who really need it?" And the doctor's like, "That's right. These drugs are being saved for Hollywood A-listers and influencers. This is a very hard time for them." And so, and then he's like, "Well, doc, you're really slim right now." And the doctor says, "That's right. I did this through diet and exercise, though." And Homer's like, "Well, you've been fat for 20 years. How come suddenly you discovered diet and exercise?" So it's interesting to me that it started out as this, it's definitely for diabetes, and it is changing the landscape there. But it certainly very quickly became this, weight loss medication.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I tell you what, everything we just talked about in this study, I mean, it all kind of boils down to that what these drugs can do and what they actually do for many people in everyday life is very different. And so, a lot of times high costs, like limited insurance coverage, because most of these are not covered by a lot of people's insurance, mental health challenges, and numerous comorbidities, they all feed into this lower dosing, early discontinuation, and therefore less weight loss than you'd expect from what you see in the trials. And so, for me, I think we still need better real world data on why people actually stop the medications, what happens when they do, how cost effective is it truly, for the hard outcomes that we're getting in this real world. And then, how do they optimize their use in younger obesity populations without diabetes as well? So there's a lot of things to unpack here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Dr. Allen, how would you summarize this study? Like, what is the take home message for our audience on the podcast today with this study?
Well, I think that the real take home is that real world results are much different than clinical results or clinical study results. And so, we have to understand what it truly means to use these things in real world scenarios. And that's what we're about to really dive into. We're going to talk about, why would you discontinue use of this product besides cost? And there are many other reasons above and beyond cost limitations, right? I
Right.
mean, we're going to get into adverse effects. We're going to get into a lot of things. And I want to reiterate what you said a while ago, Dr. Mark. This is not a bash on GLP-1s. These things are miraculous drugs for a lot of people. And they really are. But you have to understand that they're not a one size fits all solution to anything. And I don't think that they're a one drug fits all solution. I think that they need to be a part of a comprehensive lifestyle. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as well, right here in just a few minutes.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's dive in then. Let's go to chapter 2. Um, we'll just, I guess, all you wanted to know about GLP-1 receptor agonists, but were afraid to ask. But we're going to start with the bright side of the GLP-1s, right? This is a modern metabolic revolution. So we'll start with the good news because there is a lot of it, right?
Yeah.
So these GLP-1 receptor agonists like Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, they've really, as we mentioned, changed the landscape of metabolic health. And Mark Simpson on the line is saying, are people losing weight because they are metabolically healthier or simply eating less? That's a very loaded and a very smart question, right? They're definitely eating less, and that puts some stress on the body, and we'll talk about that later. But for some people who are eating way too much for one reason or another, there's evidence that they're metabolically more healthy because they are losing this adipose tissue, right? The question is, will it last? Is it the right approach? Is it happening too fast? So there's a lot of nuance in that question, Mark. Glad you asked it because it's a great segue. So, yeah, as we mentioned, originally to treat type 2 diabetes, but now proven to be some of the most effective tools that we've ever had for reducing blood sugar, aiding weight loss, improving cardiovascular outcomes. So there's a lot of studies that show that there's some miraculous impact from losing that, the way excess of adipose tissue.
Yeah. Well, that's absolutely fascinating. These drugs, as we said a while ago, they didn't start out as weight loss miracles. They started out as basically hormone mimicking type drugs for diabetics. And so what they found out over time is that, man, they have some tremendous benefit for weight loss, and people started using them off label for that. And it's really caught on.
Yeah,
So,
and we know how they work, right? So give us a rundown, Dr. Allen. Oh, I'm going to test you now. Tell us how they work.
well, so let's just stick with the GLP-1 receptor agonist before we get to the GIPs and the glucagons and things like that.
Yeah, maybe it's best to explain what happens in the body. Your body creates a natural peptide called GLP-1, right? And it happens every time you eat. So then there's a chain of events that happen. What does the GLP-1 do? What's its job?
So this GLP-1's job is to orchestrate your metabolism after a meal. That's very simply it. And so it tells your pancreas to release insulin just enough to handle the amount of glucose that just came in from your diet postprandial. It tells your brain that you've had enough to eat, so it gives you that sense of fullness. And it helps to slow stomach emptying, which helps control blood sugar and keeps you satisfied longer. So it's one of the body's key metabolic conductors, making sure that the fuel use and hunger and everything, all of those things are in harmony.
Isn't it amazing that we're not even having this discussion, and most people would just take it for granted, not even interested in it until there's a drug that mimics this effect, and you go, holy cow, has my body been doing this all the time? I eat food, and that's why I don't have the food-seeking behavior anymore. That's how the pancreas knows what's to do. The stomach slows down. This is amazing orchestration of metabolism by what your body is already producing.
Yeah, it is. It really is. If you think about these synthetic versions, this Ozempic, this Wegovy, this Mounjaro, they are GLP-1 receptor agonists, basically, which means that they mimic that natural signal as our normal endogenous GLP-1 does, but they are engineered to last a lot longer in the body than our normal GLP-1.
Exactly. We've talked about half-life before, which means the time that it takes for half of that drug to be sort of gone. And the half-life of these drugs is on the order of a week, right? Which is great it makes it very convenient because you only have to have the injection once a week. But it means that peptide is hammering constantly against those hunger signals, against the sort of the stomach slowing down. Compared to your body, the natural peptide lasts about 2 minutes before half of it's gone. So your body has to keep, signaling in response to food in the GI. And when the food's not in the GI, the signal stops, right? Not so much with the synthetics.
No, it doesn't. And, unfortunately, Dr. Mark, we've also talked, besides half-life, we talk about those negative feedback loop activations as well that occurs. And when you've got something that's taking those receptors up for such a long, long period of time, you get that negative feedback loop activation. And what it starts to do over a long, long period of time is that it starts to impede our body's own natural production of GLP-1 as well. And so that's one of the long-term side effects. And that's why, you want to be really careful with this. If you start shutting down your body's own endogenous processes, that's one of those side effects that takes a long time to get back when you come off this therapy.
Yeah. And maybe we're getting ahead of ourselves because this is supposed to be like the positive side. So you and I
Yeah,
just can't
yeah,
help but like be scientists and go, wait a minute. But it still is a big deal, right? For people with obesity or type 2 diabetes, for whatever reason, right? GLP, and we've talked about this before. We've mentioned how hard it is to be an anciently programmed human living in this modern world where
yeah,
our jobs don't require a lot of physical activity and we are surrounded by food. It's the first time, really, in this last 100 years, it's the first time in the existence of humans that we've had to deal with this very difficult situation. We haven't adapted yet. So it's a big deal. And for people with the obesity or type 2 diabetes, it can be life changing.
yeah,
And like that clinical study that we just looked at shows 15 to 20% body weight reduction in so many users, improved insulin sensitivity and fasting blood glucose. And that leads to a reduced risk of heart attacks and strokes, right? Some of the strongest data we've seen from any metabolic drug class
yeah.
before. And that leads to other things too, right? Other positive effects.
Oh yeah, reduced inflammation, improved liver function, reduced progression of kidney disease in some studies. It's phenomenal. It really is profound, and what it ultimately leads to, it actually translates into a lower risk of virtually every major disease linked to obesity, and that includes diabetes, heart disease, sleep apnea, fatty liver, even certain cancers. And so, yeah, these peptides are not just another fad, Dr.
Yeah.
Mark.
Another smart question from Mark, where, if the body already creates the GLP-1 naturally after every meal, um, to regulate all these things, what is it that's breaking down that sort of requires us to have a drug that that sort of makes this drug necessary? And I think that I touched on it, right, where really I feel like we have our ancient programming, right? We've got our factory setting that is designed for scarcity. And so a lot of activity and a lot of food seeking. So this has been a survival
Yeah.
thing that has kind of, because of the change in modern lifestyle, has really made it difficult and kind of necessary. I do worry a little bit, though, that um, these are being positioned as, and I think Mark touched on it with his question. There's that nuance there, like, oh, does that mean that we're deficient in GLP-1? Kind of like, some of us are deficient in a B vitamin or something. And the answer is no, we're not actually deficient in GLP-1. That's not really the case. It's just that the GLP-1 is sort of helping to overcome for those individuals that have just been caught up to such a great degree that we just have it's so hard to have control over our eating habits.
Yeah. Dr. Mark, if I might add another thought to that as well. I love what Mark is saying right there. And I think a lot of it has to do with the type of diet that somebody is also consuming. Because if you think about it, we can eat certain foods and it makes us feel real satiated. I mean, like we can go hours and hours without getting hungry again. But we eat other types of foods and it seems like we're hungry within 30 minutes after eating those types of foods. And so I think there's some other nuances that we could probably attach to that, saying, okay, the type of food that we should be eating versus the type of food that we're maybe eating, on the run or whatever, ultra high processed foods. We know that they're very lacking in nutrients. They're not, high quality nutrients. A lot of that is broken down as well. So I think there's a lot of nuance into what Mark is saying right there when you start looking at diet. you also have to look at insulin sensitivity as well, right? Because if we're not, if our bodies, if we've lost that insulin sensitivity, then that's going to impact our GLP-1 response. So there are quite a few things in there that I think add up to this. It seems to me it's a multifactorial issue. I think that's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. And we won't dwell like for too long. We don't have a lot of time, but we want to talk a little bit about sort of the downside. But on the upside, let's just bring in this last thing, which I think is real, right? There is an emotional impact to, a real, I think, a human side to the impact of these GLP-1 RAs, right? There's food noise. Like we are just, again, it's part of our design, right? We call it food noise. What it is hunger and hunger peptides and hormones in our body that are saying you need to find food. And it's designed for our bodies that were designed for scarcity, right? But those people who have struggled their whole lives with appetite regulation, they often describe GLP-1 RAs as turning down the food noise. In fact, I think Oprah was one of the first people that I heard say that, like, wow, suddenly I'm not thinking about food all the time. It's like major peace of mind. It's so interesting, isn't it?
It is. So, okay, let me ask you a question. Toning down food noise. Practically, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I think, again, let me look at it this way. I don't know if you've ever seen that show Alone. And yet they put these guys out there, and these are like survivalists. They know how to hunt and fish, and they know how to make shelter. And you watch these guys out there, and they are constantly thinking about food. Like after a day or two, they're like starving, they're hungry, and everything that they think about is driving them to go hunt and find food. After about a month, like half of them are like evacuated because either they're injured or most likely they've started to lose so much weight that they just can't sustain it. So interesting to me that how difficult it is for humans to survive, and yet that's our design. So that's food noise, and it's actually a good thing. Is it a curse? It's actually, it helped humans to survive all these thousands of years. But in this modern setting, that food noise, constantly thinking about food when there's food all around you all the time, I think then it just becomes if not a psychological mess, it certainly leads soon to a physical mess.
Yeah. Would hunger pains be a physiological food noise in your mind?
Hunger pangs? Yeah, I guess
Hunger
that's kind
pains,
of a later stage of that that signal that's happening, right?
Yeah. Well, and people who eat a high carbohydrate diet where your insulin's constantly going up and down and up and down and up and down, they experience like tremendous levels of hunger pains throughout the day. And so it seems like that would, to me, would be in a practical setting, that would be one thing that people would consider to be a quote food noise, as a physiological food noise. So I could be very wrong, but to me, that seems like it would make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
well, maybe we should talk about the other side now. Like, there's certainly positive there. So I hope you guys get the message. We are not trying to vilify. We know there's a place for these synthetic drugs. Some of you may well be on it, and that doesn't mean that you've sort of left the religion. I think it's important to recognize that, right? There's a lot of people where it's helping them. But we just want to make people aware, and not to scare you off it necessarily, but at least to help you know what you're dealing with and maybe how to mitigate for that, right? How to help you sort of maybe avoid some of the worst side effects. Does that sound like a reasonable positioning, Dr. Jones?
that sounds phenomenal. And I'm going to be all over this next section because, if we look at it, the body's not losing just fat alone. It's also losing muscle. And so, one of the most talked about issues right now with GLP-1 RA therapy is that, for long-term health, we have to be concerned about the loss of lean muscle mass as well. So, when you're losing weight fast like that, Dr. Mark, and I'm seeing people, I've lost 45 pounds in 4 months and stuff like that. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the stress of that. But in my mind, that is not sustainable weight loss. And there is no way that all of that weight loss is body fat. You've got to be losing a ton of your muscle mass simultaneously to be able to lose that much weight in that short a period of time.
Yeah,
So
the data bear that out, right? So it's true, because what happens? Like, okay, if you're giving your body the signal, a very potent signal that you've already eaten, even though you haven't, then you may eat a small amount of food, and it's much less than you'd normally have. And what does that mean? Well, that means that you're getting less protein, you're getting fewer micronutrients, right? The level of everything, your carbohydrate, your protein, your fat, is gone down. And your muscle needs a constant signal. We've talked about this before, right? Again, we're built for scarcity. Muscle is expensive to maintain. If your muscles don't get a constant signal that they're needed, and that's through physical activity, but also through a signal that there's amino acids in your bloodstream and therefore permission to build, then they will atrophy, right?
yeah, absolutely. And you know, when they start atrophying, Dr. Mark, I mean, you're losing your metabolic fitness. You are losing your body's ability to utilize energy in a way that it can help to, you know, build our mitochondria. It can help build our muscles. You're losing that capacity to do that. And long term, what we're going to see is we're going to see an increase in, guess what? Sarcopenia, my area of expertise, or even worse, sarcopenic obesity, which is
Yes.
even worse than just sarcopenia by itself, because now
Yeah.
you've got obesity combined with sarcopenia.
Yeah.
So,
Now, let me just give you an anecdote here. I know this is not a scientific study, although it would really make an interesting study. So, my wife goes to a local gym, and she does her Orange Theory and other things, and some weight training. And every year, this is the time that she dreads. She dreads going to the gym in January and February. Why? Well, because people make New Year's resolutions. And so you get a ton of people crowding into the gyms those first couple of months until sort of the New Year's resolution wears off a little bit. It really takes commitment to stay fit, cardiovascular and muscle wise, right? I would hope that the doctors are talking to their patients and saying, hey, you don't want to lose muscle mass. So I recommend that you go to the gym. Like, it's no longer a New Year's resolution. You want to make sure that, yes, you're losing fat, but you're keeping your muscle, because it is your youth and it's your metabolic strength. Um, Anecdotally, my wife said, this year's been different. There's nobody at the gym. There's no rush January and February. That's amazing to me on two fronts.
mhm.
Like, maybe I'm jumping to conclusions here, that I think more people are relying on the weight management drugs, and they are also not getting the message that they should be maintaining the muscle mass. So
Yeah.
double effect.
No, I think you're exactly right, and I think that's what we're about to talk about here in just a few minutes as we kind of progress our way through you know, the other side of this story. And ultimately, for me, GLP-1s are tremendously beneficial, but they have to be used as a part of an overall holistic program. They have to be. And if you're not doing that, then whatever benefit from a scale perspective, a weight loss perspective you're getting, it's not going to stick around because you have not adjusted your lifestyle. You have not done the things that you need to do to get to a point to where you can go off of those drugs and maintain it, especially if you're losing 45 pounds in 4 months. Just not going to happen. That
Yeah.
is not sustainable weight loss.
Yeah.
So,
Let me
but
let me just toss in a question that one of our viewers just watching right now said, well, then why not add some of these, like ipamorelin, tesamorelin? These are these peptides that you inject that actually sort of help the muscle to stay. I think that's a really interesting approach and very tempting. So, okay, we're losing muscle mass from this synthetic peptide, so let's add another one that helps the muscle to stay. Remember, though, that you need to have the building blocks for the muscle. So it's important, like, if your appetite is really suppressed, you're not sort of sending the muscle the signal that you have permission to build because the amino acids aren't there. And there's another side effect too that we've talked about in the past, and that's sort of more the dual role of those signals in the muscle. So when it's not being told to grow muscle, it's actually doing its cleanup of the body. It's called autophagy. So it's running through the body and cleaning up senescent cells and cancer cells. And so there is a little bit of a price to pay when you have a very potent muscle peptide. So we've talked about that in the past. We'll talk about it again probably in the future. Today we're focusing on the GLP-1s, but that's a really interesting question from Laura.
Yeah, that is, Dr. Mark. But you know what it makes me think about? It makes me think about polypharmacy from the pharmaceutical world, because the pharmaceutical world, their objective is to have everybody on 3 or 4 or 5 drugs. They would love to have a customer base of 300 million people on 5 drugs for 20, 25 years. I know it used to be there, right?
Yes.
So it used to be in that world. That was, but I think what Laura has really pointed out right there, it seems like that's the pharmaceutical type of mindset of, okay, we're going to take a GLP-1, but in order to reverse the side effect of muscle loss, we're going to take this. In order to reverse the side effect of mitochondrial dysfunction, we're going to have to take this. In order to reverse, so we just keep adding and adding and adding all these quote peptides. That's the pharmaceutical philosophy. When I think our philosophy and what we're going to talk about now is that, yes, if you're going to use GLP-1s, let's don't just start replacing all of these other things with, exogenous solutions. Why not look at it from, okay, diet, you should be eating more protein, exercise, you should be doing resistance training 3 or 4 days a week. You can use bioactive precision, food derived peptides to help us prevent muscle loss and muscle protein breakdown, and also prevent the inflammation that is occurring, because a lot of these things are going to cause a lot of inflammation and a lot of stress. And so I
I
think
love
they're
that. I
just,
love that. So
yeah,
wait a sec. Let's recap that. You said we need to build muscle, right, to protect our metabolism during fat loss.
yep,
So you're saying, you said go to the gym, do some resistance training.
yep, that's
Make sure
right.
that you're getting enough protein, right? Really focus on that. And that would be like, at least my philosophy is like 30 grams 3 times a day. You
Mhm.
might say 100 even, maybe even more, but around that ballpark is
Yeah.
easy for me to remember, right?
Yeah. Dr. Mark, believe it or not, on GLP-1s, the studies that I've collected from that, they're recommended 150 to 180 grams of protein a day,
Yeah, which might be hard
almost
when you don't
double.
have an appetite, right?
That's right.
So
Very
you kind
difficult.
of, it becomes unpleasant to eat more food than you kind of feel like you need to eat. So then, so we also have a fit peptide, right? We have that peptide from the fava bean that also helps. So in the absence of that signal, like, yeah,
Mhm.
make sure you get the protein, the exercise, and the fit. The fava bean
Yep.
peptide is actually really going to help optimize that. What
That's
about
right.
sleep? There's a role for sleep in
Oh,
maintaining muscle, isn't there?
absolutely. I mean, if you're not sleeping, you're not recuperating, you're not rejuvenating, you're not rebuilding muscle that basically broke down throughout the day, especially through your workouts. If you're not sleeping, I've said it before, if you're not sleeping, you're dying. So
Yeah.
get your sleep. It's really, really important. So,
Yeah. And
yeah.
poor sleep is going to exacerbate the muscle loss effect. So if you're on
Yes.
a GLP-1, like, make sure you're doing the best that you can for sleep. And we've had podcasts before about sleep hygiene. I'm just going to throw in really quickly 3, 2, 1. Have you heard of that one, Alan?
Three, two,
So,
one. Tell me.
yeah, 3, 2, 1. 3 hours before bed, then just
Mhm.
lock down all of your sort of your tasks and your business and your work. 2 hours before bed, no more eating. 1 hour before bed, it's put away the phone. I mean, this is like, okay, it's just a rule of thumb, but that three,
Yeah.
two, one rule, I think, is pretty cool. That's a very basic sleep hygiene. But we also have a peptide from rice, a rice peptide that actually helps to, when you're losing muscle, the evidence is that actually cortisol goes up. It's a stressful thing.
Mhm.
And cortisol interrupts your sleep cycle. So very important to get good sleep, and restored. A product with a peptide derived from rice is actually helping to lower that cortisol noise.
Yeah. I want to ask one of our viewers a quick question, because Laura says that she works for a compounding pharmacy, who obviously, because I mean, she is very knowledgeable. She was the one that asked the question a while ago. But she's obviously very knowledgeable in both therapeutic peptides and bioactive peptides. Um, what is she seeing from a practical perspective, from a a real world perspective, what is she seeing as far as cessation of using these peptides? And it would be really interesting. I just wanted to type it in there. How many patients out of 10? I mean, are they seeing 5 out of 10? Are they seeing 7 out of 10 stopping treatment after, 5 months, 6 months, whatever the case may be? Or are they able to maintain use? And are they using the recommended dosages of those peptides? So, that's some questions that I have that I just love to ask people as well. So, but Dr. Mark, if you think about it, we talked about why it's such a big deal. We talked about the emotional impact. We're really starting to talk about the other side of it, and how the half-life, that signal that never turns off, how that can be, somewhat concerning. You and I were kind of having this conversation the other day of, at what point, if you're taking a drug with a 7-day half-life, how long does it take us to get to that steady state of the actual drug and the pharmacokinetics of that drug, right? Yep. Because if you're taking a milligram, let's say you're taking a 1 milligram dose that has a 7-day half-life every 7 days. Well, at the end of 7 days, you're taking another dose. All of a sudden you have 1.5 milligrams. And then how much do you have at 14 days and, 21 days and 28 days? And so you got to start thinking that way. And then I start seeing the people that are, doing this micro dosing now, where they're taking a dose every single day. And that becomes really concerning to me, because now we're taking a 7-day half-life every single day. So where do I end up with that steady state?
Yeah.
And so
and clearly it's the half-life of the peptides. This is, again, just to summarize then, it is the half-life of the synthetics, the fact that they're designed to last so long and hammer the receptor sort of constantly for their lifespan. That's what's causing the potency of them. And so when we talk natural bioactive peptides from nature, their half-life is much more in the order of how your body would do things. So they work with your circadian rhythms. They don't overstimulate these receptors, but they do help. They're not as potent, so you have to take them every day, but they are game changers. So,
right.
This is a really nice, sustainable approach, right?
Yep.
So, Alan, do you think it's time to go to chapter 3, the Petri dish?
Well, yeah, we still got a lot to talk about with GLP-1s, but I think that's going to have a section 2. What do you think? Well, maybe next week we'll take up the next section of everything we've got to talk about.
Yeah.
So, yeah, let's talk about from the Petri dish, because Dr. Mark, this was an incredible question that we received from one of our top affiliates, and she's very, very knowledgeable. But the question from her was, what can someone expect at the cellular level inside the body when you start using peptides consistently? In other words, what happens after, a week, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, etc.? So,
yeah, it's a good question. And I love how this has been framed, like what you would expect if you take these bioactive precision peptides consistently every day, right? Because there were a couple of questions on the chat here, like, so is it best to take them just as needed or every day? And the answer really is they're gentle. They have short half-lives. So yeah, you need to take them every day, but they're sustainable. So what should you expect to see after 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days? I guess it sort of depends on which, but let's talk about a stack, shall we? Let's say you're taking natural peptides for sleep, for muscle, and for appetite. Okay. So lean, fit, and restored. What should we expect? I had a bit of a crack at this, all right? So let's look at 24 hours. I think we're going to feel better rested. We will probably many people report immediately a difference in muscle soreness. I think it's from those peptides that are in the fit that are a bit more anti-inflammatory, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe after 24 hours, if you have really shifted things and you've decided not to go for sugar, you might experience a headache from sugar withdrawal, right? So the thing to learn about that is like sleep and sugar do impact metabolism almost immediately. But you won't see any visible changes.
Right.
So if we
Right.
put that into what you feel and what you need to learn and what you'll see, that's 24 hours. Maybe you can have a crack at it, Dr. Allen. What do you think is going to happen after 1 week or maybe 28 days in terms of what you'll feel, what you probably need to learn is happening in your body, and what you might see or
Yeah.
notice?
Well, first off, I kind of want to qualify the way I'm going to answer this,
Okay.
because I want us to understand that everybody is different. Okay. We all have different biochemistries. We all have different issues within our systems. Some of us sleep better than others. Some of us, work out better, have more ability to put muscle on than others. So there's a lot into this answer. And I'm gonna basically say it like this. When you're taking bioactive peptides like Fit, Lean, and Restored, you're putting peptides into your system that are going to help to optimize your body's processes. And that optimization is what we're looking for compared to maybe a substitution or a replacement of our body's processes. We're looking to optimize those processes. So, in my mind, Dr. Mark, it depends on, for example, if we've got somebody like, for example, we had one affiliate who just absolutely had zero ability to get a good night's sleep. I mean, 30 to 45 minutes a night. I saw his sleep
Wow.
numbers and I was blown away by his numbers, but I was concerned for his overall health. And we just kept
Absolutely.
encouraging him. We just kept telling him, just stay on Restored, stay on the product. And it took some time. But what eventually happened was his body was able to use those peptides as a mechanism to optimize his circadian rhythms and normalize those circadian rhythms. And you know what? Now, if you look at his sleep scores, and he posts them on the internet, most of us probably know him. He'll post them all the time. And now he's getting sleep scores in the 80s and 90s consistently. And
Wow.
I've never seen somebody as pathetic as he was in his ability to sleep. I mean, it was ridiculously bad.
And we've
But I
done
think
whole podcasts on sleep and how important that is. So
I
there's
know.
someone who, how long did that take then? Was that a month for him to feel that way?
It took several weeks to
Yeah.
get him to a point to where he started getting really, really good sleep.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think it's all about, for me, it's all about, what happens at, 2 weeks, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. It really depends on the person. And so some people might take Fit, Lean, Restored, and they might have phenomenal results in the weight room. They might be getting strong, and they might see that in 2 weeks, but they may not see a sleep benefit for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And I think the point of what I'm trying to say is that the key to success with bioactive peptides is consistency,
Right.
daily use, and consistency to your commitment. And if you'll
Yeah.
do that, they'll eventually help to optimize your system where you're getting those benefits.
Yeah. Well, I can just tell you from my experience and talking to some of our people on the peptides that by 28 days, they're usually feeling a little bit more sustained energy and sharper thinking, right?
Yeah,
Especially if they're
yeah,
sleeping better, they're going to have sharper thinking and more emotional resilience. And for me, I
absolutely.
know that exercise felt easier after a month, right, than it normally did. It was often a kind of a pain. I have this regimen where I like do pull-ups and sit-ups and stuff in the morning and be like, oh, that's such a struggle. I just don't want to do this. But now I'm like, I do this pull-up and I go, wow, that was way easier than I remember. I can do a
Mm,
few more of these. Um, the, I, I asked the question like, what should you learn? What is happening behind the scenes? Well, here's something that we do know, right? When you start doing this, when you start sort of taking care of your muscle and sleeping better, the myokines from your muscles are really starting to work. They're starting to support your brain and your tissues. And by a month of consistency, I really feel that your myokine system is in full gear, that
mhm.
you're really making the most of what your muscles have to offer in what I would call their cellular intelligence, which is expressed through their vocabulary of
Yeah.
500 or 600 of these myokines, these small proteins and peptides.
Yeah, man, I tell you what, you couldn't have said it any better there because, as we build our muscle mass and as we improve the quality of our muscles, we improve the capacity of our myokine expression throughout our bodies. And like we've talked about many, many times before, if you're not familiar with the word myokine, you need to be. Myokines are simply endogenous peptides, and we have the incredible ability to influence myokine expression on our bodies. And it happens through muscle contraction. One of the great things that we're doing internally right now, Dr. Mark, as you know, is we're doing the make 3 breakthrough with our corporate employees right now. And we've got them doing these exercise snacks throughout the day. The whole purpose of doing an exercise snack, which is a little 2 or 3 minute exercise routine where you're getting some really, really good muscle contractions, is to get a consistent, basically, flow of myokines going through your body from head to toe multiple times throughout the day so that we can take advantage of our body's own internal endogenous pharmacy. Basically, that's what myokines are.
Yep.
So
I love it. Yep. We'll talk a lot about it. And I think our audience knows more about myokines now than 99.9% of the rest of the world population.
They do. You found that out firsthand.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a really cool question. So thanks for that from the Petri dish. Well, I guess let's go to chapter 4, Talk Nerdy to Me. And if you're still tuned in and you haven't left us a review yet, please go and do that. Meanwhile,
if clearly if you're still here, your standards are as questionable as our humor.
Yeah, that's right. It's time for Talk Nerdy to Me. This is the part of the show where we shamelessly combine science with dad jokes, except tonight we're not really going to combine it with science. What we have found is a whole bunch of really funny tweets that are related to GLP-1s. And so we have been collecting some of these tweets. And I'm going to read the first one. This is from Tabitha from @the tolerant weft. I don't know what that means. She said,
"Hey Brett, I'll pop this up for us real quick. We put them on a presentation. There we go."
Okay. So, well, I was just going to read the tweet. So go to the next one. Going on Ozempic, not to lose weight, but because the inevitable class action lawsuit is going to pay out like crazy. All right. I don't advise that.
This one? Thanks to Ozempic, big pharma is now medium-sized pharma.
Oh my gosh. Really? Do drug dealers actually take their own product? I thought that was not advised. Just kidding. Okay. Here's one from the shadow of the nerd tree @AgraB. Ozempic only works while you're on it. Once you go off it, you'll be fat again, as opposed to diet and exercise, which you only have to do once.
That is very true.
My goodness. Okay, that really hits on something true. So guys, diet and exercise is a lifetime endeavor.
Yep. How about Ozempic is impressive and all, but I'm not a fan of how it works, which is basically just as an appetite suppressant. So it's easier to eat less. I don't want to eat less. I want a pill that somehow absorbs the calories from the large pizza I just ate and gives them back to God.
That is so human nature, right? We want our cake, we want to eat it too. Maybe that saying has never been more relevant than today. So the drugs are never good enough. We want the next one to drugs. That's right. A good one. All right. From Bob Phillips @Bob the Suit. I ate 9 ice cream sandwiches and now I'm too full to take my Ozempic.
Oh man, except that Ozempic's injectable.
I know, right? Don't spend the details there.
Yeah.
Well, as you know, we are a legit bona fide podcast now. We're on Spotify, we're on iHeartRadio, Amazon, Apple Music. So just like you need to like us and give us a good review, we need to recognize some of our staff and sponsors. Now we have to actually recognize them. So our assistant to the PR specialist is Lotta B. Essen. Thank you. And our assistant transportation coordinator is Orson Buggy.
And our AstroTurf installer is Nomar Wheaton.
I don't even understand that. No more Wheaton. I get it.
No more. Our attorney general is Janitorino.
Oh, that's going back a few decades.
That is, yeah.
And our Attorney General in charge of tobacco settlements is Hubert H. Humvee II. I don't even understand this guy. And our assistant to the PR specialist is Lotta BSN. Yes. Well, I think
I
we
get
already
that one
mentioned
for
her.
sure.
Thank her twice. Well, you've done
Yeah.
it again. You've spent another hour with us. You chose science over scrolling, some pretty deep science today. You've chosen cell signals via peptides over cat videos. Love that. And you've once again chosen peptides over procrastination.
That's right. Now it's time to go make a difference, guys. Get back with the person that got you on the call, or get back with the people that you got on the call tonight, and make sure you come back and see us next week. Same time, same place.
And we don't even know what we're going to talk about next week, but we'll figure something out, and we'll see you in a week's time.
All right. You guys have a nice weekend and stay warm out there. It's about to get bad, what they say anyway.
Yeah. Bye-bye.